So here we are with probably the most conflicting video I'm going to do in this series, at least for me personally. I'm going to come right out and say it. I love Black Flag, while simultaneously thinking it's a terrible Assassin's Creed game. Coming off AC3, I was angry and considering scrapping this whole project because I just didn't want to play another game in this series, but I pushed on and remembered why I'd adored Black Flag oh so long ago. And I'm guessing if you've played it, you can name some of those reasons right off the top of your head. Sailing the seas as a pirate in charge of your merry band is just downright fun. Two of my biggest gripes with the previous games is there was no sense of progression as upgrades were unneeded and pointless, along with the side content feeling like something that you should be avoiding lest you make the game somehow even worse. What we got here were systems that made me want to do everything but take part in the story, which I'll admit is a problem in itself, but we'll get back to that later, it's more complicated. What matters is I never got tired of sailing around, listening to shanties, taking prizes, and upgrading my precious jackdaw. Black Flag is very far from perfect, and I'll be sad to shine a light on those areas of the game, but we have far more to talk about in a positive manner, so don't expect a Debbie Downer here. There will be no restraint on spoilers here, so if that bothers you, you'll have time to click off now, but let me be perfectly honest with you. There's nothing I could spoil that would detract from the game itself. The story is an inconvenience the majority of the time, and the beauty of this game is found in ignoring it, so don't feel shy about sticking around. That being said, if everyone who wanted to hop off has, let's get into the game that I believe caused permanent damage to the Assassin's Creed franchise, while simultaneously being one of the best games they've produced. Let's get into Black Flag.
I think I'll keep her.
All hands aft, lads. We're taking this one home.
I murdered William Moore as I sailed. I spied 3 ships from Spain as I sailed, as I sailed. I spied 3 ships from Spain as I sailed. I spied 3 ships from Spain, I fired on them amain, and most of them I slain as I sailed, as I sailed. And most of them I slain as I sailed.
We'll start with the great strength of the game, and that is simply playing it. The combat here is the fastest and most aggressive we've seen in the series up to this point. Edward prefers dual swords as our ideal pirate captain would, along with up to 4 pistols that I recommend crafting the holsters for as soon as you can. It's worth it. There's no real way to talk about Edward's combat style without talking about him fighting ship to ship, so let's start with the big centerpiece of the game in the naval combat and exploration. Once you finish the tutorial chapters of the game, you'll find yourself taking a ship and sailing through the storm to freedom. When you reach the other side, Edward will decide to keep the ship and name it the Jackdaw. This will become your home for the rest of the game, and to be honest, I couldn't be happier. It's a modest ship with 7 guns and relatively weak armor, but she's got heart, along with being faster than most ships you'll come across, having the ram synonymous with a brig, and being very upgradable. The list of upgrades you can make to the ship is pretty long, so let's run through it. The hull for added protection, more cannons for more firepower, adding more chase cannons to better tear through an opponent's rigging with chain shot, helping to slow them down, a bigger, stronger ram that is way more useful than you think. You can add mortars to increase your long-range damage output, better swivels will allow you to better exploit weaknesses you create in enemy ships, and you can also upgrade your ammunition such as your round shot, chain shot, and my personal favorite, heavy shot for those up-close and personal encounters. There's also... No, that's it. Ship-to-ship combat is awesome in its own right, with the wide array of ship types and tactics they use forcing you to adjust to their combat styles. Especially in the early game when your damage output is limited and your weak hull leaves you vulnerable. While all this is fine and dandy inside the story missions, it's elevated to a much higher degree in free play. I really feel like it's the first time in these games since Altair's story that I felt my decision making was important, and for more than one reason. Taking a prize is about more than just fun. It means bettering your lot in life when you take the materials needed to make your ship stronger. Upgrades do cost money, but they also require materials, and you can't just buy those at the Harbor Master, which means if you want that new set of cannons, you'll be out searching for ships with metal on board you can use to upgrade. As the resource costs increase throughout the game, this makes deciding what ships to attack more and more important. Don't get me wrong, by the halfway point in the game, you could probably destroy anything outside the legendary ships, but it doesn't mean you'll want to. Every engagement is a time investment, and the amount of it you'll do means that by the time you're going after elite upgrades, you'll need so much of a specific material that you won't want to waste your time with anything other than that material. It was a ton of fun to look through the spyglass deciding on my prey, sometimes charging at a man of war for the bountiful supply of wealth it carried on board, and other times taking a schooner over a frigate because it had 90% of the value on board and required a fifth of the effort to take down. There's a time in the game where even a frigate is something that would be enough to steer the Jackdaw away from because the tough fight simply isn't worth the reward. But by the time you're in the endgame, only the mightiest ships will pose a threat to you. The sense of progression is phenomenal as you go from a ship full of men taking what you can, to a fearsome crew taking what you want. Speaking of progression, I mentioned how there was never a need to upgrade an AC3, and for Edward at least, that's true, but earning cool gear is so much fun that you'll absolutely want to. In Ezio's games, I wanted the legendary armor sets because I wanted the upgrade, but here when I look at my gilded sails and think of all the work capturing forts and doing missions from one end of the map and back time and time again, it puts a smile on my face. I did that. Those are mine. The set can be same for the golden flintlocks I loved seeing upon my person. I'll admit the pistol swords didn't quite feel as good for me in comparison. Doing 15 mostly unique naval contracts with a climactic final mission fighting against waves of bigger and bigger ships in a storm feels incredible. Doing 30 assassin contracts that feel pretty much the same and require no real effort for a pair of swords with a couple of unique animations doesn't really hit the same. Especially once you get the blowpipe, which pretty much just acts as an I win button. Get in range of your target, stick them, and watch they fight their own crew to death as you collect your stealth bonus since nobody saw you. Also, the so-called stealth outfit you unlock doesn't seem to make you any harder to detect, so I wouldn't really bother. Besides, it looks ridiculous, and Edward has plenty of better fits available. So you're a fearsome crew out stalking the seas for a prize to take. You've won the fight, but now it's time to board. How is it? One word. Phenomenal. Attacking smaller ships like a schooner can be over in an instant, especially as you become a true sniper with the swivel gun over the course of the game. But when boarding a man of war, there's no chance of avoiding the chaos, so you best be ready to wade into the fray wielding sharp steel and a will to use it. Challenges required to complete a boarding like killing the captain, destroying powder reserves, yeeting a scout off the top bunk, a general number of kills, and tearing down the ship's flag give each boarding just a touch of variety that keeps staleness at bay. Doesn't matter how many times I do it, launching off the rope swing to come down on deck in slow motion, sword in hand, will always feel awesome. The soundtrack here is worth mentioning, but it's so good we're going to see the return of the music section after we wrap up our conversation here, so don't think I forgot. That being said, what we should talk about here is everyone's favorite part of Black Flag, in the shanties. This was simply one of the best adds to the game as it makes the simple act of floating through the Caribbean something enjoyable. I do have to make a concession though, in the pursuit of fairness, for all the joy this game brought me, and for how good of a game it is. It isn't a good Assassin's Creed game. I suspected this game was the beginning of the design philosophy that would lead us to Origins, and from where I'm sitting, it looks like I was right. All the worst parts of this game are the moments where it's clear they went, ah, crap, we gotta do like assassin stuff. Tailing is tailing, but when many of your missions won't require stealth, the ones that do grind the game to a halt. I'll get into more specific examples when I go through the story, but long and short of it is that this game is at its best when it's doing this. And at its worst when it's trying to do this. You may meet the assassins in the first half of the game, but you won't even attempt to join them until like the last 2-ish hours of the game, and that's just not enough time to develop a whole story that I would care about. I'm off track again, but part of the reason is I want to talk about the rope dart, which you get right here at the end of the game. But I really, really wish I had it all along, because while in stealth it's pretty so-so, really was more clearly meant for Connor's time in the trees in that regard, in open combat it leads to awesome kills like this, and a new way to reach out and touch your enemies. If they added this around, say, the time you were marooned, then I would have really enjoyed playing through it with the rest of the game. It is what it is, though. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention there's actually more to do outside of what I've already mentioned. I touched on the concept of elite upgrades. Well, these are the last step of an upgrade line for parts of the ship and will require you to find the matching plan for them. These can be found via treasure maps leading you to digging up a chest containing them, but they are more likely found under the sea as a result of going diving. I hate this. But it's a great addition that fits extremely well, and I can see a lot of people enjoying it. Personally, I don't like doing what's essentially an underwater stealth mission that sometimes contains jump scares. Sorry, but whatever floats your boat, they don't take too long. Outside of general exploration and hunting, the other activities you can take part in is gathering Mayan keystones to unlock a set of armor that looks cool but doesn't feel super cool. I wouldn't bother. Along with whaling. Now, I have to be honest, through all my other playthroughs, I thought whaling was a bit of a violent activity that fit well with the realities of the game, and considering that's entirely optional, it wasn't something that bothered me very much. That being said, someone on the subreddit literally compared it to genocide, saying it was harder to watch than, for example, and I'm seriously not kidding here, movies like Schindler's List. I'm going to quote word for word here. When asking about how much whaling you had to do because he was sensitive to the imagery, which I remind you, I agree with and is a very valid take. It's not a pleasant sight. Then someone replies, Bro, it's a video game, you aren't skinning them for real. Which is kind of a dickish reply, but again, also fair. But then this motherfucker hopped all the way out of pocket when he said, and again, I'm quoting word for word, "Why would somebody cry during Schindler's List? It's not as if they're real Jewish people being put to death." So for you, sir, out there comparing whaling to the Holocaust and pretending that's not insane, I present to you my new reaction to going whaling in the game. I'd like to point out that at the time of writing this has been living in my head rent-free for 44 days. It's just insane. So yeah, to wrap it up with a nice little bow, I highly recommend the gameplay in Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Sail the seas with your merry band of pirates, sing shanties, and take prizes. There's dozens of hours of fun to be had out there, and I couldn't get enough of it. Just don't go looking for what made the Assassin's Creed games good in the first place. Speaking of which, on to the story.
In a world without gold, we might have been heroes!
You know what? I was feeling negative about the story, but the reality is that what I dislike about it is that it gets in the way of the gameplay. I love the cast we get here, and there's some very strong character moments, so let's get into it. We start out in the midst of a storm and a desperate battle between two ships before being blown into a flashback where we see how Edward got here, privateering in the hopes of earning enough for a better life for himself and his beloved Caroline. When he washes up on shore, an assassin by the name of Duncan Whirlpool will crawl up on the beach saying he needs to get to Havana. We get into a bit of a spat when he tries the carrot and then the stick to try and get Edward to help him, so naturally Edward will kill him, take his stuff and his clothes before searching for a way to get to Havana and cash in on what he was doing there. It's at this point I realize the game ran like shit. It's no secret I often emulate my favorite YouTubers, so let's have our Mandalore moment. What worked for me is the frame drop fix on Nexus mods by Yassine980. It can be a little weird to get it working, so I'll walk you through it quickly. Download the RAR file and extract it. I had to use WinZip for this, which I absolutely do not recommend. Now attempt to launch it, and if it works first try, great, but it never did for me, so what I had to do was open the task manager, go to details, find your DED overrider, right click, go to analyze weight chain, click all the boxes, and click end. Now try it again, and you should open in the tray this time, but sometimes you have to do this step more than once. Then just hit the add button and select the single player file and you're good to go. I'll link this in the description, of course. With that sorted, you'll make a friend instead bonnet and head for Havana, before being pulled out of the Animus to be bored when learning that you're apparently an Abstergo employee working with Desmond's memories. Also, they tease Japan even though we still haven't been there. It's been 10 years! Rebecca makes a cameo and we return to the game we want to play. After a couple inconveniences, we head to the governor's house in the guise of Duncan Whirlpool, where we have a friendly shooting competition before showing off our assassination skills. It's not a great tutorial, but it's not the worst. We hand over what we brought and join the Templar Order before robbing everyone at the table. To be clear, Edward knows nothing of Templars and assassins, he's here for the cash. You're told there's more cash in it for you to help escort the man they called the Sage, so we go and do so, helping fend off an assassin attack. Then Edward does exactly what he does and gets greedy going after the Sage himself, only to end up getting caught and exposed as the fraud he is. We wake up in chains alongside Adewale, and working together you'll escape, free enough sailors for a crew, and steal the ship that will become the Jackdaw. You'll have a chat with Addy, and come to the conclusion that he'll be your quartermaster before stopping off to hunt and resupply, then heading to Nassau. You'll recruit a crew and take to the seas to take your first prizes alongside Benjamin Hornigold, and make your first upgrades to the Jackdaw before taking part in a plantation heist. None of that is super exciting, but we'll meet a few of our main characters here in James Kidd, although not really. Ed Thatch, aka Blackbeard, and Benjamin Hornigold, one of the more level-headed of the group. Thatch will hatch a plan to steal a man of war and use it to help defend Nassau, which will lead to us tailing and killing the captain who happens to be Ducasse, who we met earlier, the assassin hunter. We steal his life, his ship, and his cove, which will become Edward's home base. It's really quite a nice little spot, and upgrading it with a tavern, bonfire, and stores is really good. You get dragged out again to go to a meeting with your boss, and you'll actually end up hacking a coworker's system for the IT guy. This will become the theme for your Out of the Animus activities, but we'll get to each of those as they come. For now, you deliver some data to Sean and Rebecca and get back to work. Kid will invite you to meet him on Tulum, so you'll head there and get your first taste of this game attempting to live up to the franchise it's a part of, forcing you to stealth your way through and not allowed to kill anyone. This bugs me for two reasons. One, stealth in this game, while easy, is boring. And two, in what world would Edward have not just cut a bloody swath through these guys like he has everyone else in the game? I mean, seriously, he pulls a leader on the leader of the assassins immediately after seeing Kid. Anyway, you'll solve a puzzle and confirm the man you saw in Havana is in fact the Sage. To the game's credit, at least they don't just go, oh, you know, Kid, we cool. They're very upset about you killing a bunch of them and are expressly told you're not welcome here. When you get out of the Sage Cave, you'll see that apparently significantly more time has passed than you're aware of somehow, as your entire crew, along with most of the assassins, have been captured and you'll have to work to free them. Before you leave, Kid will offer you the chance to work on assassin's contracts, which I'd already done a dozen of at that point, but whatever, and showing you where the Mayan keystones go. Vane and Rackham will show up in Nassau with a lead on a pile of gold being held in a fort, so we go to take a look at it. I had already captured most of the forts in the game at this point, so it was no bother, and we find Governor Torres inside and make a little deal with him. We have to convince Kid to stay his blade for a moment so we can tail Torres and the slaver Prince to where the Sage is being held. I would like to point out not only here, but at several points in the game, Torres will be outspoken against slavery, which I just really enjoy as a character trait for one of our antagonists. Prince sniffs out our trail and will have to make a second run at it that night. James Kidd will reveal that she's actually Mary Reed, and I mean, like, duh. He'll kill the slaver, but the Sage will escape. Nassau will find itself in need of medicine, and to keep Thatch from doing something rash to get it, we'll buy a diving bell and search an underwater wreck for it instead, although we'll come up empty-handed. With that having failed, Thatch will indeed do something drastic, charging headfirst at a man of war that will have you pulling his ass out of the fire and then piloting his Queen Tan Revenge in combat, which is pretty damn cool. You'll secure some medicine, but not enough, so Blackbeard will resort to more drastic measures, capturing hostages and trying to force a town governor to get him the medicine. This will lead to us doing what I think the one stealth sequence in the game is that I found fun. Ship stealth is really and truly stupid, especially in this context, and I'm not even going to try to defend it, but running through the swamp is something that I, for the most part, enjoyed. You'll be pulled out again, this time hacking the security system before handing that info off to Rebecca. Blackbeard will decide that his time is done and say his goodbyes, more or less, sailing for retirement. Soon after that, Woods Rogers, who you met earlier in the game, will come to Nassau with offers of a pardon for all pirates, and being the type, Hornigold will hear him out, bringing a few others along with him. You'll tail the meeting to eavesdrop before stealing what info you can. With the conclusion that Nassau experiment is over, you will hatch a plan with Vane to turn Rackham's schooner into a fire ship and use it to break the blockade they're running to keep everyone inside. This will include stealing some gunpowder barrels and killing the Chamberlain, who has an all-around more violent approach when compared to Rogers. Running the blockade is pretty fun, even if I would have absolutely soloed it and plundered every ship out there without need of a fire ship. Edward and Vane will set off to see Thatch and find his retirement party. Vane isn't too happy with him, but Kenway is a little more neutral, saying that he isn't done yet but understands why he's choosing to walk away. Thatch will pass a lead on about the Sage before kicking off the party. Unfortunately, we see something that feels wrong and follow a guy away from the party where he will find out he's in fact a spy reporting in, and this will kick off an attack from the British Navy. It's an epic set piece that will have us bounding across flaming rooftops to get to the Jackdaw to fight it out, heading into the breach once more with our dear friend Edward Thatch before getting one of the most powerful moments in the game, along with a line that stayed in my head from the first moment I heard it.
In a world without gold, we might have been heroes!
This is seriously one of the best moments across any of the Assassin's Creed games, and I think that it's worth acknowledging that while this story doesn't have much to do with Assassin's Creed, it's very solid on its own. Sailing away in this moment is something that weighed much heavier on me than I would have imagined.
What of Thatch, sir? Did he fall? Captain?
He drinks damnation.
We'll use the lead Thatch gave us and go after a Royal Africa Company's ship in search of the princess, the ship we believe the Sage to be aboard. This goes a bit poorly when the crew members mutiny alongside Rackham and we end up marooned alongside Vane, who goes just a bit crazy on the island. You'll have to take him down before your escape comes up and it's time for you to leave. This mission is pretty much pointless, as you'll end up back with your crew in charge of the Jackdaw like nothing happened. It seems Rackham proved a poor captain yet again and ended up fleeing back to Nassau and taking the pardon. Speaking of traitors, Ben Hornigold will also have switched sides and actually ends up working directly with the Templars. We end up trailing him and Rogers back to Torres and eavesdrop, getting what info you can about the Sage's location. I actually really like this moment in which Ben looks over at the dock, sees the Jackdaw, and goes, "Oh, I bet Edward's here somewhere." It's incredibly reasonable that a large and identifiable ship would stand out and that someone would take notice. The info you learned here will lead to finally catching up to Roberts, and after freeing him of Templar burden, he will agree to take you to the observatory. On the way there, Hornigold will rear his ugly head, and you'll have to go after and deal with the traitor once and for all. First taking on his ship, then after running it aground, going after him to finish the job, which I did by having one of his own men shoot him. Get to the location Robert told you about and clear the jungle of the tribesmen who guard the observatory. When that's done, you'll get to the door and the Sage will shoot all of his men, telling you that what's inside would destroy their lesser minds, something that will actually come up later. He will activate the observatory and show you its wonders. The ability to literally see through a person's eyes, sometimes. The perspective changes based on the needs of the scene. It's weird, I don't know. He then immediately betrays you, of course, before walking out to live the way he wants to. A short life and a merry one, he says. You then wake up in the modern day to find out that apparently you work for just the worst company in the world. Crazy how well they predicted Amazon's working conditions, as you were drugged and locked in a room and then told you can always pass the time by working. The IT guy, Sam, who you've been working for, lets you out though so you can help cover your tracks. You hack the security terminal and then get the in-game commercial for Black Flag before Juno pops up and Sam has a fucking meltdown as you casually stroll back into your room, which is just so damn funny.
Now! Living in that goddamned head of yours! Fuck, 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 fuck! Why did she spare you? Why are you still here?
We find Edward was dropped off by Roberts into the hands of the Crown after the Jackdaw left him. We happen to be in prison with Mary Reed and Anne Bonny, who are also in prison for piracy. With the help of Atabai, the leader of the assassins, you escape and will help him break into the prison and rescue your friends, but not without seeing a few others first. You find the remains of Jack in a cage outside, and Edward shows the softer side of himself here.
You weren't much of a friend, Jack Rackham, nor an able sailor neither. But you were strange and lively, and you made me laugh more than once. And that's enough to make me sorry for seeing you like this. I hope you found a lasting peace, down there among the dead.
I tend to more or less share Edward's opinion on Jack, and I was surprised to find myself upset by what had happened to him. I said it before, and I meant it. This game has a wonderful cast of characters and awesome character moments. Inside the prison, you'll also run into Vane, who was apparently captured and brought here after your experience on the island together. Edward will say goodbye by wishing him the best and saying he wished they had parted as friends. You find Mary and Bonnie, but Mary is in a bad way, so you'll have to carry her out, refusing to leave her no matter how bad it gets. But it's all for naught, as she will die in your arms with freedom just feet away.
Don't die on my account. Go.
This is such a pain in the ass. Damn it. You should have been the one to outlast me.
I've done my part. Will you?
If you came with me, I could. Mary.
We'll be with you, can we? I will.
Search every nook and cranny!
This changes something in our fun-loving pirate captain. From the word go, he never claimed to be the good guy. He was a man out to get rich and didn't care about what he destroyed to get where he wanted to be. And this made for an excellent character. He wasn't an evil person, but certainly a bad one, although he was surrounded by people who saw the good in him and believed in him. It was simply his ambition to live a better life that led to him being the man he was, persevering through all the setbacks, confident that if he kept pushing forward, he could live the life he aspired to. But this was one too many losses. He watched Blackbeard want for peace at the end of a hard life, only to be cut down the very night. He watched a friend in Charles Vane go mad and had to fight with him just to survive. His crew on the Jackdaw left him more than once, and he found a man who was little more than a fool playing at being a pirate rotting in a cage. the once cheerful Calico Jack. Not to mention the only other level-headed captain in Ben Hornigold had betrayed him and forced to fight to the death. Now here lies Mary in his arms, a woman who believed in his better nature and who trusted him time and time again to be more than what he is now. She wasn't the one who was supposed to die. She was the best of them, and in this moment I think Edward Kenway decided to live up to her memory. He is given some of the very best character development in the series, right up there with assassin mentors like Altair and Ezio, but he did it without a creed to guide him. When this is all said and done, he may well end up being my favorite character in the series. We return to the home of the assassins in Tulum, and after finally being given the rope dart, we help defend this place we once helped to destroy, only if through our actions. With this, we will have redeemed ourselves in the eyes of Atabai, and will join the assassins to hunt down the Templars in Woods and Torres. Addie will decide to stay among the assassins and sail no further under your flag, but Anne will take his place, and she's just as welcome in that spot as he is. Unfortunately, this will be for the most part the end of our fun as we're forced to act as an assassin for no known reason. At least in the next mission. Our gear is stripped away from us as we're sent to tail a diplomat, steal his clothes, and sneak into a party to kill Woods Rogers. I understand that we're meant to be acting as assassin for the first time here, but that doesn't mean you need to take away my tools. Just add in the stipulation my kills need to be undetected. I didn't feel like I had to make a more skillful approach to my target, just that my options were limited, and that wasn't cool either gameplay-wise or as part of the narrative. We do get a lead on Roberts though, and we set sail for Principe. We sneak through the encampment, which is really pretty pointless as we just end up chasing down his ship anyway, and because he refuses to engage in it, we just end up spamming mortar fire and chain shot, which isn't very interesting. Board the Royal Fortune and say goodbye to Dread Pirate Roberts in one of the most gangster send-offs ever.
A merry life and a short one, as promised. How well I know myself.
Take the skull from the observatory and use it to locate Governor Torres, then head to kill him. It's actually just his double, but you can at least get rid of his bodyguard El Tiburon before returning to the observatory to kill the real Torres. It's actually pretty cool as you'll get in and see his guards going crazy, seemingly the madness Roberts warned of. Killing Torres is essentially the end of the story, although there is another ending we will get to in just a second. Before that, though, we're woken up in the modern day, and would you believe it, the IT guy we've been working with happens to have a very familiar face, a modern-day sage still in search of Juno. Security comes in and will drop his ass to make sure we don't have any consequences of that to deal with in future games. You're then given the worst apology from your boss, and as a thank you for everything you've done up to here, you're given the trailer to the game and encouraged to go back to work. And I guess we just do? Kind of insane, but whatever. Then Sean and Rebecca call and are like, hey, sorry for all the blackmail and stuff. If you want to help us, we're like assassins, so that would be cool. I've heard from more than one person about how the assassins are always shown as the good guys before Rogue, and while that's absolutely not true, this isn't even the worst thing they've done in the series, and yet it might bother me the most. Anyways, though, we return to Edward and get what I think is the best ending to any of the games so far. Edward is given his home to the assassins in place of Tulum and plans to return to England. We'll be gently caressed into the credit by Anne's song, which tugs at my heartstrings every time as he welcomes Jennifer, his daughter. They will sail for England together, and I just love them. Edward has grown into the type of man capable of raising a child, and in the short time we know her, Jennifer is a charismatic and fun person. The game will end where the previous one began, at the theater in London, where an older Edward surrounded by his daughter and new son Hatham Kenway. I like this a lot. Part of me wishes you couldn't play the game after this, because it just feels like such a perfect way to say goodbye. And it'll be mine.
Of all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I count. So felt
I'm certainly not the first one to tell you that the soundtrack to Black Flag is fantastic. Alongside the shanties, just the overall music is phenomenal and easily hits my top 3 in gaming. Regardless of the fact that you already know, let's enjoy the soundtrack for a little bit. Ah, that was nice. Alright, let's wrap it up. You may not walk in the shoes of an assassin for any meaningful amount of time in Black Flag, but there's so much more beyond that to love. Edward, on reflection, is easily my second favorite character in the series, if not the first. I'll have to let recency bias fade a bit to be sure. Regardless of that, though, what won't change is that he's an excellent character with excellent development that the writer should be proud of. Along with him is one of my favorite casts of characters outside of games like Mass Effect that live and die on charismatic casts. The deaths of Thatch and Mary were heartbreaking. Seeing Addie walk away left me feeling alone and broken. Finding the fates of Jack and Vane made me feel the weight of the world around me. I loved everyone and I will miss them when it's time for me to move on. The open world they created for us to explore was phenomenal and one I could get lost in forever. From feeling like a pirate out for loot and plunder, taking what you please and destroying any who would get in your way, to an explorer on land and below the waves. Taming all aspects of the oceans from swimming with sharks, hunting the elusive white whale, to boarding a man of war, only to come face to face with even deadlier foes in the name of legendary ships that will take all you have to defeat. The combat style is perfectly suited to a pirate captain, and you can be as efficient or as flash as you want to. The simple truth is that if this had been called Ubisoft's Black Flag instead of Assassin's Creed, it would have been one of the best games of all time, but it wasn't to be. Even with that being said, it was a blast to replay for my 6th or 7th time, and I would heartily recommend it to anybody. Well guys, that's going to wrap up this chapter of Assassin's Creed in review. From the lowest of lows last time to complicated highs this time, I find myself sad because I have to put this game down for the time being, but excited again to continue this project. If you're still listening, know that I appreciate you. Assuming nothing has changed, the next project will be out the same time as the others. We'll be tackling Rogue next, and I expect that it should be interesting one way or another. Until then, this is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile.
And what do you think of our creed? It's hard to say. For if nothing is true, then why believe anything? And if everything is permitted, why not chase every desire?
Why, indeed.
It might be that this idea is only the beginning of wisdom, not its final form.